everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So today we're in economic and personal finance. We're in our third unit on government regulation. So today we're going to start talking about some of the regulations that deal with like the health industry, some other trade regulations. But we're also going to finish today talking about the pros and cons of government regulation and how there's pros and cons to it. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So today, let's start out talking about regulation for health purposes. Things that the government regulates in our society that keeps us healthy, because if everybody was sick, that doesn't help the economy at all. So let's start with the FDA. The FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. So the FDA is really, really important and probably has one of the biggest day-to-day impacts on your life, and you're probably oblivious to it, which is typically a good sign for regulation, is that when it does what it's supposed to and doesn't interfere in a lot of ways. But let me explain to you what it does. So this is a meat packing plant. This is that they get beef, they hang them up, and then they're going to cut steaks and ground beef and stuff out of it. This is modern, all right? This is clean, it is regulated, everything looks exactly the same. There's a certain way it's done. There's inspections on this beef, so you know that all of this beef here is going to be healthy for consumption. That used to not be the way it was. 100 years ago, it looked more like this, where it's just completely disgusting. And there was no regulations, there was no rules. You just cut up meat and you sold it. All right. The people who made the regulations were the people that were running the company for food. All right. Like the beef industry, they're the ones who basically made all the rules for how to sell beef. You know what their number one goal was, which since it's a for-profit business, is to make a profit, which cool. The problem is when they started putting profits ahead of people's health, a bunch of crazy stuff would happen. So at the turn of the century, there was canning stuff, like canned meat was very common. The problem is that in order to maximize profits, some of these meat packing industries would literally put anything they could find into these cans. Now, while this says ham and tongue on it, literally there were stories of people like getting a hand caught in a grinding machine. It would take their hand off and it got packaged up and put in a can and got shipped off somewhere and somebody ate it. All right. But the owners didn't care because it's all about profits. Who cares if what people are eating? Well, people started getting really sick. All right, people are like, I wonder why everybody's getting sick off this canned food that I bought at the store. Well, it really wasn't until this dude comes out, Upton Sinclair, and writes a book, very famous, called The Jungle, in which he called out specifically the meat packing industry on all the grotesque things that they were doing and that they were having people eat because there was no oversight. The Jungle is very important in American history because it happened about the turn of the century, around 1900, because out of the jungle comes the FDA that we're talking about today. So the Food and Drug Administration. So not only does the FDA manage food now, so the FDA is a government corporation, government organization that oversees like how meat packing plants are done to make sure it looks more like that first picture instead of the second picture, and to make sure that you're not serving things that make people sick. Not only that, they also regulate restaurants. You ever seen the sanitation score? That's the FDA as they go into a restaurant and make sure that the restaurant is clean enough and is not going to get people sick. They also deal very heavily with drugs. I mean, FDA, talking about legal prescription drugs. The FDA is a pivotal part of deciding which drugs are allowed to be made and which ones are not. So like just trying to make aspirin or ibuprofen, like when it was being originally created, had to go through all this testing by FDA to make sure that it is safe. So any new drug that's coming on the market, you see advertisements for new drugs, ask your doctor about whatever random drug it is. That has been extensively researched by the FDA. And the FDA also, like you see those commercials and it's talking about all the side effects, that is due to the FDA wanting to make sure safe things get put out there. So the FDA pivotal in making sure that our food and drugs are safe for consumption. The next one, all right, for our health is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Protects the environment. You're like, okay, how does that keep me healthy? Well, we had to create this one also at the turn of the century when industrialization had gotten very strong. A lot of pollution was getting put into the air and people were getting sick. So the EPA goes in and regulates these big factories to make sure that they're not putting out harmful stuff into society. Now, if you see like the big cancer smokestack thing here putting out all these cancerous stuff, and we know about it, that's an easy one to go stop, all right, or to regulate. And so the EPA, when they first came out, that's what they were focused on. The EPA has a whole bunch of different focuses now. One of the most recent ones that is crazy is in Flint, Michigan. It's the town of Flint, Michigan. So what happened, and this is crazy to me, so the city of Flint, Michigan, for whatever reason, they were getting their water from Lake A, all right, and people were drinking it and everything was fine. And for whatever reason, that got too expensive, so the city decided we'll just get it from this river over here instead. All right, so they got their drinking water from this river. Obviously, they're going to purify it and all that before they send it to the house. The problem is the water would show up and it would look like rust color. These bottled water here is actual water that came out of the tap. All right. I thought they cleaned the water. Well, the problem was the water from the river, all right, had more of a corrosive quality. What was happening is these lead pipes that were carrying water throughout the town didn't have a problem when they were carrying from Lake A. The river water, though, is more corrosive and it would deteriorate some of that pipe as it was going through the pipes, and some of that pipe gets into the drinking waters, and that's what makes it this like rust color. People were getting wildly sick from this, and the EPA had to go in and figure out how to fix this because you can't just switch back over to the other lake because you still have the same problem for a variety of reasons. So just in 2022, the EPA ended up awarding $100 million to Flint, Michigan to fix this. Now, did Flint, Michigan not do their own due diligence and kind of cause this problem themselves? When I say them, I'm talking about the government that should have known this. Yes. Well, then why is the government bailing them out if it was their fault? Well, people are dying. That's why. It's still the government has to go and provide money and infrastructure to keep people healthy. It wasn't, Bob's fault down the street. His water all of a sudden was undrinkable. It wasn't his fault, and he pays taxes. So the EPA jumps in on things like that. Also, if there's like an oil spill, the EPA is all over it, not only trying to clean it up, but trying to prevent this from happening. Oil spills are like a complete failure of all the regulations that EPA has put out there, and usually it's people clearly not following the rules. The EPA has a ton of regulations, tons of them. In 2016, that year, there's 27,000 pages of regulations that the EPA puts out on businesses and producers on what you can or cannot do as far as you have waste. Where do you do it? You have liquid. Can you just pour that in a river? And like, what can you do with your waste? What are you making? What are you doing with the air? A lot of agriculture, pesticides. Hey, you want these bugs to stop eating your crops, but can you keep spraying all this food people are going to eat with these chemicals that may or may not seep into the food? These are the types of stuff that the EPA looks at now in order to try to keep America safe. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons to this. But right now, let's talk about the pros because we'll talk about the cons here in a little bit. But the pros here is that the EPA and the FDA are designed to keep people healthy because healthy people contribute to an economy. So the question here is explain the purpose of the FDA and how their regulation benefits society and the economy. All right. Pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right, now we're going to talk about the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. So the Federal Trade Commission basically makes that commerce, which is a fancy word for trade, between people in America is fair. That buyers and sellers, that it is fair. So this is the Federal Trade Commission. Probably one of the easiest things to let you know what they regulate is, you ever heard about false advertisement? People say one thing and it's completely not true. Well, that's blatantly illegal in the United States, and the FTC goes after that. So if they say, hey, lose 30 pounds without dieting, and sprinkle this little, these little things on your food, and all of a sudden you lose a bunch of weight. This is a real company. And that really did get called out by the FTC, and they got completely shut down because this is false advertisement. You can't promise something and not deliver on it. So false advertisement, the FTC goes after people with false advertisement. Now, it gets like, if you see, hey, look at this cheeseburger from McDonald's on TV, and then you go there and it's like all mashed down, like, is that false advertisement? You start getting into a gray area like that. But here where they're like, you'll lose all this weight, and it's like nothing, that's false advertisement, and the FTC goes after those people and prevents that from happening so that we have a fair market. Another thing the FTC does is they want to make sure that your privacy is intact. So this is a new thing that the FTC really focuses on. One of the most famous ones is FTC forced Facebook to pay if you're counting those zeros, that is $5 billion. That is $5,000 million that they had to pay to the government as a penalty. The reason these people have to pay a penalty and don't go to prison is because the entire purpose of a company is to make a profit. So the best way of punishing big companies when they break the rules is to take profits from them and fine them. And because Facebook is so big, this is like the most ridiculous fine ever, but $5 billion. And the reason they fined Facebook is because when you would sign in Facebook and you would go click and see, like, on your social media, Facebook was recording all the information of what you were doing it and finding out like the things you liked and disliked, and they would sell your information to companies that wanted to sell you things that you would like. And then all of a sudden you'd be like on Facebook looking at something, and then you'd go over to another website, and all of a sudden all these advertisements show up for the exact same thing you were either talking about or looking at on Facebook, and you had no idea why. Like, why was that happening? Well, Facebook is basically stalking you while you're on their platform, and the FTC says that's completely uncool. You cannot do it. It's not, the reason it's illegal is because you did not tell the people you were doing it, and they didn't have an option to opt out of it. If they had told them up front that they were basically stalking you and then said, are you cool with this? Check yes or no, wouldn't have been an issue. But your privacy and being able to, have some idea of privacy on the internet, the FTC went after Facebook for blatantly violating that. Another thing the FTC does to make sure trade is fair is mergers and acquisitions. So we talked about antitrust laws yesterday, trying to break up monopolies. FTC actively prevents monopolies from forming. So if like AT&T and Verizon, the two biggest cell phone companies, wanted to merge together right now and create like one big, like AT and Verizon phone company, the FTC would say no. They can literally jump in between these two private companies that are going to merge together and be one big company, and the FTC would be like, you cannot do that. Absolutely not. Because that would create a monopoly, because it'd be one company then controlling the whole industry, or over 80% of it. So the FTC also regulates mergers, meaning merging together an acquisition. So like one big company can't buy the second biggest company if that would put them like over 80% of the market. So they also keep monopolies from forming. So the question here is, explain how the FTC protects consumers from deceptive practices of businesses. So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right, the Small Business Administration. This is really important. You've probably never heard about it, but if you have heard about it and your family uses it, it is very, very, very helpful. All right. So the SBA, and it is almost exactly what you think it would be. It is a government organization to help small businesses. And one of the biggest things that the SBA does, the Small Business Association, is they give out loans. So if you're a small business and you're trying to open up a mechanic shop down the street, you might not have any money. You might be a skilled mechanic, but you don't have any money. Banks might be hesitant to loan you money, but the government would be under the SBA. Say it's a smaller, you're going to have 5 employees, you're going to have your little shop. So the government doesn't give these businesses money, they loan it to them. And usually they're pretty decent interest rates for the consumer. So you have to pay it back plus some thank you money. But the government creates this because while little Bob wants to create his Bob's Mechanic Shop down the street, there is some big mega mechanic corporation that puts, an oil change thing on every single street corner. It's hard for Bob to compete with the unlimited money of these big corporations. So the SBA specifically comes out and helps out the little guy. And they do it very much with loans so they can get on their feet. They do have to pay it back, but there is some very focused money to help out small businesses. The large corporations cannot go get a small business loan because they're just expected to use their own profits or get it out from a bank since they have more collateral to work on. So why this is important, I don't think I'm doing a good job of explaining it. So let me, one final time, hit the highlights here. Small Business Association loans Bob money to create a mechanic shop. The reason no bank would probably loan Bob any money is because you have to have collateral for a bank. The bank's like, I'll give you money, but if you don't pay it back, what you going to give me in return? Well, if Bob doesn't have a business yet, banks aren't going to loan him a business because they don't have a business to take from him if he doesn't pay it back. The government regulates the Small Business Association. They absolutely will give him the loan, and then he'll pay it back. So there is a focus on making sure that these people can achieve the American dream and get a starting point here. So the question here is, how does the Small Business Administration provide support for small businesses? And why do you think there isn't a large business association? Like, why don't they do the same thing for large businesses? All right, so pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So we have talked a bunch about government regulations, and there's a lot of positives. It is, in my opinion, a net positive over time because what was happening in the late 1800s really was unsustainable for our society, whether it was, people get sick off food or monopolies, people not being able to achieve the American dream. However, it would be ignorant to say there aren't clearly some negatives that are associated with government regulations because there's pros and cons to everything. So let's talk about some of those. The first one is cost. It is, if you're a company, it is more expensive due to government regulation. You're like, okay, cool. Like I can make this product. I got 3 employees. That's great. The government comes and says, whoa. 3 employees? That's not safe. According to government regulations, you have to have 5 employees. So now you have to pay, for 5 employees. A better example of that is, so you're making this product, hooray, and you're selling it for this amount, and you're making a profit, everything's good, but then you have some leftover waste, and you're like, cool, just go throw that in the trash can, you're cool, and we'll just throw it away. And then the government comes and says, hold on, that right there is some unsafe material. You actually have to hire people to come pick that up and spend all this extra money to dispose of your waste. And you're like, these government regulations, for health and safety are costing me a lot of money. So what ends up happening is either the company goes out of business or they have to raise their prices to pay for all this extra regulations that they have to follow. And that's usually what happens. So costs go up, not just for the producer, but since the final product cost has gone up, prices go up as well with these government regulations, and those prices get passed on to the consumer. Another thing that is pivotal for a company is innovation, all right? New ideas, new ways of doing things. Government regulation puts a big damper on innovation. It's like no innovation after this point. The reason being is once something is done a certain way and the government has gone in and regulated it, all right, it's not real easy to change the way you're doing something if the government's already regulated it, doing it the old way. And companies and the market and the invisible hand of the market, that moves really, really fast. Government bureaucracy that does these regulations does not. So innovation moves quick. Without the ability of being able to do things quickly, it really hinders your the ability to do things new and better if they've already been regulated the old way of doing it. It's really hard to change ways of doing things if it's already been regulated. So it's hard to make it better. So it limits innovation. But generally the amount of cost really struggles. It also stifles some competition. The reason that is because you have to follow all of these rules in a industry in order for the government to allow you to produce it. Say you're an oil producer, all right? There's all these regulations you have to do. It is really hard for somebody who is not currently an oil producer to become an oil producer because then they have to learn all these new ways of doing things. And a lot of times they'll be like, I'm just not going to do it. So the regulations a lot of times will prevent new companies and ideas from coming into existing markets, and therefore you're not having a lot of new competition, which is in a market economy, competition is necessary to keep prices down and quality high. So the question is, explain how government regulations can also negatively impact businesses. So talk about some of the negative impacts it has on businesses. All right, so talking about what we just got done talking about there with limiting competition, because of that, it limits choice. If there's less people in a market because it's so highly regulated that it's hard to get started in a market because just the cost, as we had talked about, of fulfilling these regulations is so high, there's really just not going to be a ton of people in each industry that has to follow all these regulations. So because of that, as a consumer, there's less choices in a lot of industries because, again, it is so difficult to follow all these regulations. So as a consumer, there is less choice there due to government regulations. Efficiency, the speed of which things can be done and the quality of it is a huge issue with government regulation. Like the top enemy of government regulation is usually speed. Do things right, don't do them fast. That is a big part of government regulation. Because of that, it slows down the speed of how fast you can produce things, how fast you can work, how fast you can go from one step to the next. So when speed is down, usually costs go up because of supply and demand. There's a lower amount of supply, and so therefore demand goes up. So the lack of efficiency usually causes prices to go up due to government regulation. Keep in mind, again, before we throw too many stones here, the whole reason that they're regulating the canned beef industry is because they want to make sure you get beef and not a human hand. So take it slow, make sure there's no human hands in there. But because of that, they don't get as many cans of meat out. Again, using my 120-year-old analogy. All right, and then an inefficient resource allocation. Governments, when they come in and they start saying, hey, there's these certain amount of resources that you have, they need to go to part A or part B. When the government gets involved in resource allocation, we used World War II as an example, but there's different examples of that. If the government isn't super efficient on resource allocation, then you can have companies that don't have what they need and other companies that have too much and there's nothing that they can do with it. So the question here is, explain how government regulations can negatively impact the consumer. So the last question was asking you, how does government regulations negatively impact businesses? Here, how does government regulations, how can they negatively impact consumers? So we spent, day and a half talking about all the positives, and we'll talk about the negatives here. So we're just focusing on the negative impacts of it, even though there are clearly positives. All right, so answer that completely. When you're done with that, I'll see you guys tomorrow.